Totally screwing this up. All right, so today we're going to be talking about when the idea of another child repulses parents. So this is specifically about parents that, are parents. Like, I'm not just talking about like the child-free adults who want to, basically act as children for the rest of their life, but the idea of parents not looking for more kids. And with me today, I have John. Uh, I'm not going to be able to say that Cajun name because I
Melanson.
always screw. Yeah, I always screw it up.
Melancon.
Melancon. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah,
if
we
you
uh we started talking about this when my wife, who said that she wanted a third child, was accused of being insane for wanting that. And
yeah, can you tell me where that happened at? Can you?
so so we were at a party, and it was a lot of young professionals, early 30s, and a lot of them only have one kid, maybe two. And my wife was approached by one of the people at the party and was told, "Hey," and I'm trying to be nondescript because I don't want to, I don't want to offend anybody. But she said, "Oh, how old is he? Because our youngest son is 5, and we have a daughter, or 5 months old, and our daughter is 4 years old." And she said, "Oh, he's 5 months." She goes, "Oh, well, you're done." And she was like, "Oh no, we want to have another one." And she was like, "You're insane. I don't envy you." And it was like, wow, that's a very strong reaction.
Yeah.
Um,
What's noticeable in that interaction is the fact that she verbalized everything.
right.
Like it wasn't just um 1 second. I stopped listening to Gregorian chant over this. This better be good.
Luckily, though,
Thank you.
most Gregorian chant is not time sensitive. It is, in fact, been around a while.
Yeah, it's been around a while. Hello,
Yeah.
Hayes, how you doing?
Um,
So like so like the idea that you're at a party with a lot of kids, and most of the parents are in their young 30s. I thought you said like mid 30s. Uh
yeah, yeah, it would have to be. It would have to be. Because, yeah, it would be like 35. You're right,
oh,
now that I'm
35,
thinking
yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and they
I'm,
all
I'm
have
just
like
good.
one or two kids. Yeah.
Right. And so like it's it's become kind of like most people know the statistics, like, oh well, we have 1.62 replacement rate. Like, so we have just a little bit more than 1.5 kids per every female that can have kids between the ages of 18 and 49.
Right.
Uh, so like that's really, really low. That's like suicide rate for a society.
Sure.
But just the manifestation of that in your context is fairly frustrating to hear. Uh, because you're in Louisiana. So like
Yeah.
Louisiana is a lot more conservative than Michigan. And publicly we don't hear that to our face, or at least
Right.
not to us, because like we've got 5 kids. And my mom, or not my mom, my wife, she's gotten some looks and side comments, but usually I've had this experience where people will like give me a thumbs up or something as I'm taking care of my 5 kids going into Target or Meijer or something.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of that positivity, but it is crazy that in Cajun country, because what's wild about that is, I know for a fact a lot of those people were one of four or one of five or one of three. Like they came from decent sized families, and then it tapers down and tapers down and tapers down. And that's what I see from a lot of my friends is they're having one or two less kids. Not that they're not having kids, but it'll be like, oh, I'm one of three. Well, I'm going to have two. Oh, well, I'm one of four. Well, I'm going to have two. Something along those lines.
So I just want to add a few more comments. So I mostly get Chaldean grannies telling me how blessed I am at the store. Yeah, we live in a Chaldean area. And then, oh my gosh, people tell me to get a vasectomy, strangers. So, and that's the crazy thing. Like in the
Yeah.
first world, like what seems to be like the first world is enraptured with a mentality that people are bad. Like people are bad for the environment. People are bad for the earth.
Or they're too much to care for. I see a lot of it as like you have to live your own life, and now you have these things that are preventing you from living your life that we call children,
Right.
and it's sad. Um, and I mean, I was lucky, but I've dated a lot of girls before my wife that were feminists, that were, I want to get my career in order, and in my early 30s, I'll start having children. And then I met my wife, and she was like 3 to 5. Sounds great. It was like good. Like, well, I don't know why this was so hard, but
Right.
apparently it is.
Well, and so like, going to the point that you said where uh so like having kids, generally speaking, like what do you think makes it hard?
Well, we talked about this a lot. Is that I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think obviously, and this is sharing more personal stuff, is like my wife, they're a little worried after 3 children. She needs to space out at least 2 years between them because potential medical complications. So that I completely understand that exists. I don't want to, I've known people that struggle with infertility, that only have 1 or 2 children because they just struggle to, they struggle with that. So I don't
Well,
want to put
so
that.
I just want to point out, just for the infertility, that
Yeah.
usually happens because they prolong having children so late.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So like they create their own problem with the choices they made leading to having kids. And then,
Yeah.
well, I'm infertile, I can't have any more kids because my first kid was after 35, or
You just
even
always
30.
have to throw that asterisk in, because that's going to be the comment is what about, and you're just like, okay, we're not talking about that. We're talking about healthy, normal,
Yep.
people. No, but I mean, there are, health complications and things that you worry about. I think the big thing though is in a lot of young professionals cases, I see them trying to give their kid a quote unquote perfect life, or the life they never had. And I think that that stems a lot from modern psychology, basically blaming parents for everything. So it'll be like, all
Yep.
my problems came from my parents, and therefore I should only have a few kids and pour every activity into them, and they need to be in every special school, and they need to be perfect. And I need to be perfect as a parent. And it's like, newsflash, you're not going to be perfect as a parent. There's going to
Right.
be things that your kids don't like about the way that you parented. And having less of them and trying to pour everything into them, one, may turn them out to be worse, but two, is just not necessary. And I know people that are, you know, I don't want to use specifics, in very expensive private schools for preschoolers. And when I say very expensive, like more expensive than colleges.
Yeah.
Um, I know preschoolers in designer clothing. And then they're like, raising kids is so expensive. And it's like,
He's from Louisiana, guys. Like
right
that's the
now, this is
thing.
this
It's
is
like
not common. It's not common. And we have lots of friends with 2, 3, 4, children, that are, around my age. I'm 31, so we have that. But yeah, there's a big problem. And especially because it's weird, because a lot of the Catholic schools are more expensive. So
yeah.
you get these kind of like yuppie careerists that are also like, and I don't want to say like non-devout Catholics. I mean, they can be devout Catholics, but it's just that those two kind of intermingle. Is being Catholic around here, or being involved in a Catholic school, can also mean being upper class, and you kind of have those two things meshed together a little bit.
Yeah, and I'd say up here in Michigan we have a similar thing going on. Like we definitely have this upper class. There's an upper class group, and that's in the schools, and um, it does definitely mingle with what you're saying. Like we kind of feel like we're like the poor family, and I know
Right.
that I've heard other people say the same thing that are at the school, at the Catholic school, that we feel like we're the poor family. Uh, we don't go to that school, like that parish, as our main parish, but that
Right.
our kids are not going to public school, and we can't homeschool right now.
Right.
So the idea of, so I want to like backtrack just a little bit, because you said modern psychology has kind of like created this problem, and I agree with you to a certain extent. I also do think that there's a real sense of idolization that happens with the parent, like usually the mom, where they love the kid so much they literally make an idol out of that kid,
Right.
and they want to make that kid as perfect as possible in their image, and it's kind of like molding a statue. And like we've talked about how we're supposed to help our kids grow, right? Like
Right.
that's supposed to be a natural part of parenthood. But there's a difference between helping kids grow and being like, my kid is going to be an astronaut. And I'm not just
Right.
saying that figuratively. I mean, like, definitively, he's going to go through the programs. I'm going to make sure, like, A to B to C to D to like double G, right? Like, all the steps in between. That's going to happen. And I'm going to push him through it. Or I'm going to make sure he or she's like so busy that, they're going to be so active in soccer and basketball and all these other sports, and to the point where they actually overlap, right? Like where the basketball and soccer will overlap, but
Sure.
they're so busy they can't have friends, but they're going to be in like these events so that they have the pick of the litter when they're older, um, to optimize their sports picks, I guess, for what they want to do in their life or something.
Well, and I think one of the problems stems from, and this is going to be, you can't see me, but I am on a soapbox, is this is this is one of the things that I think that the most common parenting mistake, if I can say that there is one, is assuming that you are not the example for your children, and to better yourself and the way that you act and the way that you treat people, that's going to impact your kids way more than being in Boy Scouts.
Yep.
Like it's
No,
just
yeah, you're right. And what's crazy about that is those couples that only have like one or two kids, right?
Mhm.
It can they they create their own problem with, wealthy family. Both parents make like, let's just say $100,000 each, so $200,000 situation. Uh, then they send their kids to the private school that you were talking about, right?
Sure.
Like the one or two kids, and then they also send them to daycare because they're both working. And then the situation arises, well, like, all right, do you want more kids? Or they get pregnant and they're like, well, we can't have more kids because look at how expensive the kids are. And
Right.
it's like all self-inflicted.
Right.
It's all self-inflicted. The idea of they have to go to the best school for like one or two kids, but then you have three kids. Does that mean they go to an average school? Like, is that somehow bad? Like, or
Right.
maybe like you could take off like not going to, a job and then raise your kids yourself instead of having literally paying like through daycare and the school. You're literally passing off your parentage to someone else and saying,
Well,
you
and
raise my kid, I'll feed them at
sure.
the end of the day, and
And,
and I'll let them sleep too.
and you don't have a good community of people that are both ahead of you and behind you in the process, because community has kind of broken down. Like I'll give a great example. Um, i- I do amateur boxing pretty intensely, and they had a guy come into the gym, and I ran the mitts with him, and I said, "Why are you here, man? You're like, mid 30s. Like, what's going on?" And he goes, "I found out I'm having a son, and I don't know how to be a man because my dad wasn't around." And he went, and I found a picture of my grandfather, and he was a professional fighter, and so I figure there's got to be some path forward with this. And it was like the most honest, brutal, like, and you just felt for him. And it was
Yeah,
sad because it was like he, and so I think that there's an apprehension to parenthood because look at our divorce rate, look at where our dads are, look at where our moms are. And then it's like, I'm supposed to have kids. I don't even know what the rubric's supposed to look like. And I'll
right.
tell you that story is more common, much more common than one would think. I mean, wildly common.
Well, if given that the rate of divorce has been so high for so long, like I come from a broken home, like my parents got divorced, and
Yeah,
so like most people I know in my age group have divorced parents,
right.
and so they will get married, Like my wife and I were about to celebrate our 15th anniversary on Ash Wednesday.
Wonderful.
And we have had so many friends' marriages be within that field because we got married before everybody else, 22 and 20. And then uh, a bunch of other people got married, and then they got divorced, and then they got remarried. And
Right.
it's like all within that time span of 15 years. And it's like, you don't know, like, you don't know what to look for. And part of it is obviously like they didn't have a generation to help them like they're supposed to.
Right.
Like their parents failed them. But at the same time, like they themselves did not try to better themselves in that area.
Sure.
Right. Like, so it's, I'm not gonna say it's fully one side or the other, but both are culpable. Right.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And the breakdown of society and the breakdown of just groups where, that's probably one of my favorite things is going boxing and the other dads. One dad has teenage kids.
Yeah.
His I think his wife's husband like passed away or something, and she's like 8 years his senior. So he's 35 with grandkids. And it's like it's just wild. And you go, "Oh, that's what it's supposed to look like." Or we have these people ahead of me, especially for people that don't have a good example. I think that takes the fear out of children,
Yeah.
um, is seeing other men and other women, interacting with it. Because the other thing too is, like, I had this silly idea that I'll never yell at my kids when I started, and then my toddler is
It's such
like,
like, it's one of those movie dreams.
right, it's just,
Like,
and then my toddler likes to. Well, she's not a toddler anymore, but she any cream is shampoo. So she found the baby's butt paste, like the diaper cream, and put it through her hair and went, "Ooh, shampoo, so fancy." And I was screaming at her to stop from across the room when I realized what was happening.
oh
And
my
that's
gosh.
just, and like, your parenting, perfect parenting doesn't survive contact with a toddler or a kiddo. It just doesn't. You can't do it.
Well, I also think what when because like my wife and I really early on we started like, well, I don't want to say early on, but like on our when we had my third kid, or our third kid, we bought a program like to get into to help us, and we went through like several classes, like several dozen classes with it, and we noticed that because we both come from divorced families, and so we understand that we lack certain conditioning and some natural help, because there's a lot of natural things that kick in when you start parenting, like how your parents parented you will come out
Sure.
as you start to parent. But like in these programs where they try to like the perfect thing, you're only gonna positively show everything, you're never gonna yell, blah blah blah, um only do
Never
math and
discipline your
consequences.
kids when you're angry. It's like, what?
Yeah, and it's just like, and it's like you're using a model that only works on one or two kids.
Right.
You're not using a model with four, five, six. You're using a model where there's two people who go to work and you're only having one or two kids. And it was like frustrating because I'm like, this, we can't do this. Like,
Yeah.
literally, we cannot do this. We cannot devote this much time. Now we've adopted some things that are good. Like like we can't do it now because of sports, but once sports gets over, is we over the weekends we will prioritize like one-on-ones with our kids,
Mm.
where I will go out with my son or my daughter, or well, one of my sons or one of my daughters, and it'll just be us. And they'll be like,
Yeah.
they'll have dad time and they'll have mom time, and we rotate through them, so that they have that expression or that focus. We also do things, ad hoc, right? Like,
Right.
where we do spend some time with them in the house, but we call them adventures, right? Like when we go out with them one on one, we call them adventures. And so like that's something we took from it, but we couldn't do that every single day or every single um every single day, which is what the program really suggested to do. So yeah, just it's not possible when you have five kids, because you do have to manage your time. And so
But they also have each other too.
that, yeah, and that's the other thing. Like they'll be playing with each other like all the time. I mean,
Sure.
some people will punch, one of them will punch each other and start screaming, but 5 minutes later they're doing it again, and they're interacting with each other. They are learning, albeit sometimes it feels like it's really slow learning, like in terms of how they're interacting. But that's part of the process. Like
Right.
that's expected.
Well, and I think that people see children, it's society telling you that children are a net negative,
Yep.
that are so, and it's so pernicious and it's so tied into our society. Like we have some very close people to us that are very devout Catholics. I mean, I don't say that lightly. I mean, they're part of the church, they're part of the Knights of Columbus, they're at, praying rosaries every day, very faithful people. And they had one kid and said, you need to have the dual income, no kids, the DINK lifestyle until you're 30. And they give that advice, and they're in their 70s right now. And you don't want to go to them and say like you've made a terrible mistake, but it's also like you probably shouldn't be talking about
Yeah,
this,
I mean,
you know.
like if they were to, an interaction with me would not be a good one
Right.
if they were advertising that, simply because it is destructive, and it's destructive not to them, not just to themselves, but to the church herself, because
Right.
you're basically saying you're going to limit God's plan. And like that's one of the
Right.
reasons why you're not really supposed to put a number on how many kids you have. It's as long
Yeah.
as you engage in the sexual act. Now I know, like you said earlier, 3 and 5, but like there's a difference between having a range of like, all right, this would be my ideal,
Right.
to
We're not
actually.
going to love our sixth kid, if they come
Right,
along.
exactly, like, exactly, no, but that's exactly it. That's exactly my point. And so we're currently as a society falling apart because we don't have enough kids. Like Social Security is going to die because
Right.
we simply don't have enough kids coming up to do the taxes. But more so is like our parenting is, again, like we we are repulsed by the idea, like parents are repulsed by the idea of having more kids, or I bet you've heard this growing up, an accident, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, she was an accident, and it's like, who says that? Like, I
Right.
mean, just think about it for like 5 seconds. You are calling your kid an accident,
Right.
and that says more on you than it does on them.
Well, and
I
it's
mean,
just a non-faith-based principle that you
exactly.
assume that your conceptions are accidents,
Yeah.
and I think that kind of it digs to the deeper issue, which is if you look at a biblical view of family, children are always a net positive.
Yep.
There is never a description. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was impoverished and traveling between countries and dealing with the fact that a poverty in which we can't imagine. Her husband as they always say carpenter, is probably more like a stonemason. Like that this guy, and that their family didn't struggle. I mean, their child was born in a feeding trough, and there's nothing but celebration around children. And the same thing with Elizabeth has a child in her own age, one of those accidents, an old age child, and it's treated as this glorious, wonderful thing because they couldn't have children. Being
Right.
barren is always a curse, and children are always a blessing. And how
Yep.
many great saints and biblical figures like David, the youngest of the brothers, are so drastically important, and for them to have gone, well, we had 5 kids and that's it, you know
Well, yeah, like there was a whole video I did where I showcased, I think, like a dozen saints that were more than 2 kids. Like they were a third, a fourth, a ninth, a 24th. Like they were all later. Like Saint Therese is the 24th or 23rd because she's a twin.
right.
But it's just like, think about that for like 5 seconds. Like why? Like the priest that Father John Brown, he's like, I think 10 out of 12.
Mm,
And he said this at the last, literally on Friday or on Thursday. And so I know a priest that is 11 of 13. And there's just all these situations where like it affects our life in more ways than I think people realize, where it's like
right,
we'd have more priests if more people had more kids,
right,
and we'd have more, I mean, we'd have more people in general if people had more kids. And the idea that that's looked at as a net negative is, I think, exactly like that's one of those like pervasive evil understandings that I think the devil's got around our neck, because it's literally killing our society. And like Europe, for example, look at Europe. Like they're bringing in immigrants because they can't financially support anything.
right.
Um, and
And we are too.
yeah. And I'm
Right.
not to say I'm not saying like immigrants are inherently wrong,
No, no,
but
no. But
when
I
you are
understand.
using them as a means that they need to literally replace the population you either killed through abortion or contracepted out, like that reflects a real problem. And then you have
Yeah.
Japan. Like Japan has a different issue where it's because all the boys have AI girlfriends,
No, no.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and so they don't get married. And so like that's a real thing. Like that, I'm not just like making that
Yeah.
up. That's a
Yeah.
real
Yeah. Yeah.
problem. Like anime is like magical girls are like a real problem for them. Um, so that's, I mean, that you have a bunch of different ways like this manifests, but right now in America, for a long time we were resilient to it, but we're starting to buckle because we're buying into all this crap, including like the stuff. Because what does that make people? Sterile. Like
Right.
when you start taking those hormones, you're sterilizing yourself.
Right.
And so you're yeah. So
No, it's
we're
all
not
part of a culture of death, for sure.
well, exactly. And so we can't, like, this is one of those things where I really wish more Catholics, like, I know you have people like Leela Rose and others who are in the pro-life movement really talking about it, but I mean, like, really from the pulpits, like, it needs to be like from the principle of subsidiarity applied at the parish level, where the priests are like, you really got to be open to more kids if you're having sex, period.
Right. Sure,
Like,
sure, sure.
and if you are preventing yourself, like, that's a mortal sin, you need to take care of that in confession, right? Like, so um because if that doesn't happen, it, like, we're just going to become smaller and smaller.
Well, and I think the other big thing too is allowing the process of raising children to sanctify you in the same way
Yeah.
that marriage does, and that's not talked about enough. Because
I,
I
I
see
think
some
that's a great point. Like,
right,
I agree with you 100%.
yeah, because it's inherently difficult, and they're like, and if you don't pray and you don't reflect on it, no, it's not going to sanctify you. It's just going to be difficult and aggravating and whatever have you.
Yeah.
Like I'll give you like a great example. My like I have always hated my face shape. So like I have to for competition for boxing, I have to shave my beard. So I have to shave down to a mustache and I hate my face
Oh,
shape.
okay.
And my daughter has the same face shape as me. And my wife said, "You think she's the most beautiful girl in the world and yet you hate the way you look. And she's a female version of you." And I had to sit with that when she was about 3 and go, "I need to reflect on this as a person and, what's
Yeah.
going on with me." And it's like and you learn to love yourself a little bit more and you learn to care for yourself in a way that if you hadn't had kids, you would never have known. And that's
Yeah.
like super sappy, but like we need more stories like that of like my children taught me to love myself or forgive my parents or grow as a human being beyond being a selfish, idiot.
Well, right, because like that's the way you mature. Like,
Right.
you're literally talking about the maturing process, being a parent, and
Right.
becoming, like, growing in wisdom, because then hopefully you share that with your kids to a certain extent. Now you can't like prevent them from going through everything,
Right.
but like it is something where it does mature you as a person. And there are things where I'm going through this like in a similar way, and there are things where I've reflected on, in, again, like in a similar way, thinking about my parents and thinking about what they did in terms of divorce, and relating that to our situation. Like, I'm because it kind of goes together with marriage, right? Like, because you're raising kids in a family. You're not raising kids as like a single parent. And if you're in that single parent situation, like, I completely understand it's hard. Like, I remember being there when my mom was crying in the corner in our
Yep.
apartment. So like I totally get that.
Yeah.
I get it's hard, but it's not even ideally like the it's that's what's supposed to happen, right? Like, you're supposed to be in a family and raise your kids in the
Right.
family. And accidents happen, right? Like, people get widowed, but like divorce is one of those things, and I don't think we talk about this enough, is more often than not a self-inflicted wound,
Right.
where you either went into the relationship with expectations that were not realistic and put in there by Disney fantasies, or you were thinking with below the belt as opposed to with your head.
Right.
And so it's there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but at the end of the day, it ends up becoming exactly what we were talking about earlier: a lack of proper parenting from our own parents,
Right.
and getting in this situation.
And there is some unfortunately, it's within God's permissive will. Obviously, nobody should get divorced. The only silver lining is you if you if you go into it, because my parents aren't together. If you go into it and go, okay, what did they do right and what did they do wrong? And
Right.
so often what happens in these divorce cases is one parent is basically relegated to the side. So the kids never really learn, like, okay, this is what mom or dad was like, this is what their interactions look like, you
Yep.
know.
No, that's totally correct. Because like usually what happens is one of the parents takes them for most of the time, and then the other
Sure.
one's like the visiting parent. And it's gotten better, but it still like prioritizes the woman in the situation, like in the legal system. But
Sure.
like even beyond that, it's more like we don't appreciate children because we don't experience them. Like, or I'm sorry. One of the things I want to say is we tend to, as a society, we don't experience children at an appropriate age. So, for example, uh, my brother and I are very close in age. Like, we're
Mm,
we're like 2.5 years apart, but we didn't have any other kids like as siblings,
mm,
and we just grew up together. I didn't know how to change a diaper. I didn't know what it was like to deal with babies like around the corner in the house. I was very much isolated from that. My cousins didn't come around until I was 16, and we only saw them during Christmas and Easter and like family events. And we didn't really hang out with them in a very direct way. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people, where they just don't experience children growing up. Like, my 11-year-old, uh, she sees her 10-month-old sister, like, and she
yeah.
plays with her. She plays with her.
Sure.
And she experiences, she's not a parent, but there are definitely some times where we say, "Hey, can you please hold your sister, take care of her, play with her, whatever?" And she'll do it. And uh, there is some resistance. Like, she is still a kid, right? Like, she's
Yeah.
11, but she does, for the most part, take care of her sister. And the other three kids engage with her in different ways depending on their age. And it's just that dynamic is just completely lost when you just have boom, boom, or, boom, you're done. And they don't experience kids. Like, they just simply don't experience their siblings.
Right. Well, and I think that one of the big problems with that too is when you call these later kids accidents, or when you have a vasectomy or whatever have you. Like, my mom's youngest sibling is 12 years younger than her. And so she kind of got to experience being a parent
Yeah.
in a way that, nobody else really would. Or in a way that she couldn't have other than being a parent directly. So no,
Right.
I mean, those younger little tail end siblings, they're great. And again, it comes back to viewing your children as blessings, one, and two. This is a critique I have of a lot of parents that I see, is they don't play with their kids. Like, they don't get out there and have fun. Because part of being a parent, I was at a birthday party recently, and we brought out the soccer ball, and it was a bunch of little 3 and 4 year old boys, and we were like, "We're gonna play soccer," and they started kicking the cones over instead of playing with the soccer ball. And so we set up the cones, and they kicked them as hard as they could to fling the cones across the yard. And it was a great time. And I got a mile of steps in, and all the other parents are sitting there on the sidelines, like staring at me being a Looney Tune, with these kids. And it's like, go have fun. Like, your kids get to play video games, so you can play video games with them. I don't know. It's just such a positive experience. And while it is tough, like, I've been up since 3 in the morning this morning because of a kid that didn't want to go to sleep and was having nightmares and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, there's so much media around it that it's kids terrible, kids awful, kids destroy your freedom, marriage destroys your freedom, family destroys your freedom. And then it's like, and then you see these people with one kid and they're super protected, and it's like, you're not free at all.
Yeah.
You're
You're
like,
bound. Yeah.
right, you're in a state of psychosis constantly. It's real. Like, I don't know. That's probably too harsh, but
I mean, I don't think so. I am all for just being very critical of people that choose to have one kid on purpose, and then, give them all the different toys they want. So
yeah,
Zamboni parenting, yes. That's so great. And this one, you learn patience and compassion in a special way when you have younger siblings like that. So speaking of when you have basically a kids every few years or whatever,
right,
because like we're in a it's crazy, like when because like we have kids every few years, I guess, and like our the spacing is like very interesting, where we're the 10-month-old, and then we have like a 3.5 4-year-old, a 6 7-year-old, and then a 9-year-old and 11-year-old. And
sure,
there's some people who will have one after another after another after another, right? Like, so it creates a situation where when someone who doesn't have kids sees someone with 3 kids under 3, like, that absolutely does look crazy. And it doesn't mean that those people who have 3 kids under 3 are crazy. It's just, for that person looking from the outside in,
right,
that dynamic is very intense for them. And so there's definitely a type of you know approaching this in a way where you want to be God-centered. You want to make sure that you're not explaining this in a way, or like showing this in a way that is going to like scare people, right? Like, but also at the same time respect people, right? Like, so I don't want to like give the impression that I'm that like we're better than the people who have like one year after another, like 3
dude.
years in
I
a
am. I don't
row.
know what you're talking about. I'm
but
100%. I'm a better person all around.
but it's just one of those things where it's like the image to people on the outside is not going to be the same. Like,
Right.
people will look at us and they'll be like, oh, well, like, that makes sense that they're spaced out that much. And then they'll look at the person who had 3 kids one year after another, and they'll be like, why did you do that? And so depending on their life situation, like, obviously that's going to play a part. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, we need to definitely be able to bring both of those examples and say confidently that they're okay, right? Like, that spacing and then having
Right.
them right in a row is okay, and an absolutely respectable position, because
Sure.
depending on their life circumstance, that's just the way it is, and that's how God blessed them.
Right.
And if you, like you said earlier, if they don't have faith,
then they
Like,
don't even view it as a blessing. They view it as
right.
a thing they're supposed to control 100%,
Yep.
and sex is a tool, and parenting is an option. And I mean, it's the first commandment in the Bible: be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
Now not every couple in the Bible had 10 children. I mean,
Right.
and that's true too. I think it's that one, it's that openness to children, and two, it's just a lack of fear about it. Like, I think there's just such a dread that comes with children, and it's I think it's vastly misplaced. And I think that's the big that's and I don't know how you convince people otherwise, other
Well,
than just enjoying your life and living with your kids. Because I feel like you can't tell people. You can't just be like, kids are great, or else, like,
like, oh, well, wouldn't society be great without kids? Like, think about that for a second. Like, no, because
yeah,
society would die.
right,
You'd have one last, let's just say, hurrah, in which the degenerate last generation could just do whatever they wanted, and they'd probably end up killing themselves.
right.
Like, and it's just, and upside down man here goes fear of sacrifice. Right, because they themselves were not shown sacrifice. Like, I think this is something that the divorce rate being so high, especially in our generation, where we're the parents now, right? Um, is such a problem because it showed to those kids, you're not
That it wasn't worth
sacrificing.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not sacrificing for me. Like, you're sacrificing for each other, like for yourselves.
right.
And that will be internalized by a lot of people of divorce. Like, and I'm not talking about those where like the man hit the woman or the woman hit the man, which by the
Right.
way does exist, but it's a matter of um
Or like mental illness or something, where
yeah,
it's
we're not
something.
talking about those cases. We're talking about cases where two rational people are like, well, we're amicably separating. It's like, time out, stop. You're stupid. You
Right.
need to talk and like, because your kids are going to suffer if you do that, and you need to show that sacrifice to them right now, or they're going to forever be um, tainted by that, by
Right.
your selfish act.
But that
Uh,
also comes from the dream parenting issue, where it's like, my husband is going to do X, Y, and Z, or my wife is going to do X, Y, and Z, and then they don't. And then it's like, well, it's like, right, because you had to invent that in your head because you didn't see it in reality with your parents.
yeah, like, I mean, to some people, they probably don't like the fact, like, well, or it's not that they don't like the fact, but it's like, do men do laundry, right? Like, I do laundry for the family
Oh,
because
yeah.
I work remote. I support the family. I work remote, and I can, in between like certain periods of my day, just put it in the laundry. It doesn't take me much time. Very easy. Doesn't it, Very easy to do. Not a complicated task. But it's one of those things where it's like, the you'll, in a weird way, on both the left and the right, you'll get these uh, expectations based off gender roles, right?
Sure.
And they'll misapproach, like they'll twist them to benefit their current situation, to stay child free or not be dutiful to their husband or wife, and just be who they want to be in the
Right.
moment.
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things that, like, I remember I was listening to a conservative commentator that said he did not know how to work a washing machine or a stove. And he was like, it was like a badge of honor. And I was like, no, that's what's wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
how do you not, you know what I mean? Like, do you never cook? And he's like, I'm a proud Italian American. I'm like, man, what are you even talking about? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. But I mean, in Cajun country, men cook. Like, that's
Right.
the norm. So, like, you cook all the meals as a man normally, um, which is kind of just strange. I don't know what's wrong with us, but I mean, that's just always been what's expected. Um, and so there's not really that stiff rule that I guess applies to the rest of the nation. Which I don't know, it's just weird. Like people, it's the same thing with like spicy food. They're like, white people don't have spicy food, and I'm like, what? We're gonna make you sick when you come to here. Like it's just like I don't know. It's
I have to.
crazy.
So like Father John was like, you better come to Louisiana and visit sometime, because I had mentioned that you were down there. I was like, yeah, my friend John like lives down there, and he's like, yeah, you better come down. And I was like, well, my wife like is scared of the crocodiles.
Well, there aren't any crocodiles.
Well, okay, alligators. I'm sorry, we interchange them. Like,
Okay.
we're
They
we're
are
from the
very
north. We're a Yankee. Like, it's fine. Like,
That's okay.
but it's yeah, it's
I'm
definitely one of
terrified
the
of
things.
crocodiles, by the way. Alligators, we have a picture of them pulling a 5-foot alligator from underneath our house.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah, that's
we have a picture in our newspaper in Sterling Heights where there was an alligator underneath someone's, I think, Jeep, because they kept it as an exotic animal but let it out for some reason in the winter.
nah, that thing's gonna eat you. Don't do that. Same thing with
Well,
pythons.
but like that actually happened. Like there's
Right.
actually a photo.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
no.
not? You're not? I'm sorry. I just wouldn't want to have to live with them. Oh, got it. Okay, you just don't want to live there. I don't want to live there because of hurricanes. So like that's
Yeah, that's real. We've had a
so,
home destroyed. It's a thing. Um,
yeah.
no, I'm not wanting to tangent too far off subject, but
Yep.
we don't have alligators like everywhere. Like like you aren't
Yes,
like
you
driving
do.
down the
According
street.
and you're all cis and whatever negative derogatory word. Like you're in the south and I'm in the north, and so I'm so sheltered by my northness.
Yeah, you guys are the smart ones and we're the dumb ones. We're all idiots down here. No, no, but yeah, I mean, and it's weird because when you grow up in a culture without as harsh gender norms and roles, the rest of the country does look very strange.
Oh yeah,
Um,
like it's really weird. And like because like I didn't grow up with gender roles. I just grew up with a single mom, like after 11.
yeah,
So like I had to do a lot of the stuff in the house simply because my mom was working.
right. Yeah, no, I mean and it's one of those things where like, because that's always been confusing to us is like people like wives should be barefoot in the kitchen. And like tonight, my wife requested dinner from me and what she wanted. Like it's just that's the more, that's the norm. And I work today. I mean, that's now she takes care of the kids and does the stuff. She's not like, she's a freeloader, I know, but no, but it's like that's part of and I think that goes back to a bigger thing too. Like my daughter cooks with me. Like, and that's a great experience.
Yep.
I put her up on a chair next to me and put a pan not on the heat, and she can like stir around stuff and whatever.
Yeah.
And she's 4. Um, but no, I mean sometimes if something's on like a real low heat, I'll hand her a spoon and I'll let her stir it around, and she has a bunch of fun with that. And that's just like it, man. It's an I taught her how to hit a baseball the other day. It's like there's so many experiences that you get to have as a parent that I want to have more than once. I
Right.
don't want to teach my kid to hit a baseball once. I want to teach 3 to 5 kids or 10 kids or whatever to hit a baseball. I don't know. I think it's your life is what you make it. And I think that the idea that you're going to go into an experience assuming the worst is also just a great way to ruin your life.
Well, right. And because like you live in the fear of that. You
Right.
don't live in the freedom that you know that the freedom that Christ gives, right? And that's it all comes down to faith. Like what are your assumptions on life?
Right.
And what are you basing your life off of? Because if you're just basing it off of material goods, well, you're probably gonna have a girlfriend, you might get married, but you guys are gonna treat each other like masturbatory tools, and there's not going to be a lot of communication, and you're going to lead to divorce. You may not be one of those couples. You may be an exception, but generally speaking, like that's what happens.
Sure.
And then they lead to divorce, and because they isolate themselves within their own relationships, and it's just like a net negative for society. But they got to do what they wanted to do, and nobody could tell them otherwise. But that's why they're in a whole bunch of debt, and their kids are with someone else, and they're lonely.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, well, like nobody wants to look at that and say, yeah, like I totally want to do that. Right.
Well,
like, there's a whole bunch of men who just refuse to even consider marriage precisely because of that image. But instead, they're looking at like Andrew Tate as a role model, which is not a good role model for a man. He's a boy who acts like a bully.
Right.
So it's like you got to like actually have men like who live really good lives, like be front and center. And unfortunately, on the left, there's just not many. On the right, you still have to like make, like when I say on the left, I mean like they have their own show, right? Like I'm not saying like there's not good guys who are left leaning or liberal, who aren't good fathers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying those that are in the limelight.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of good examples. And on the conservative side, there's also not a lot of good examples because they will promote divorce. They will promote promiscuity. They will do a whole bunch of things that they shouldn't be promoting and say, oh, no, that's cool. It's conservative. There's not any law against it. I'm libertarian anyway. And so you end up having yeah, go ahead.
And I think it's also not only what they say. I mean, one of the reasons that I stopped listening to Steven Crowder was the way he talked about his wife through divorce. And I don't know if you know much about that, but I mean, he went on air and like trashed her. And I was like, I'm never listening to this dude again. But he's a conservative that believes in strong family values. And it's like, I'm not saying that, I don't know what happened in their marriage, but it's like, man, you can't come on a platform with 4 million subscribers and trash your ex-wife. Like that's just.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then, or you got like Mark Rubin, and he's promoted as a conservative. Even though I actually don't think he is. I think he's just
Dave Rubin.
Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
Although I just think he's an old school liberal. And what happened when he had 2 surrogate mothers? A bunch of conservative people went out and like congratulated him on having kids. And it's like, okay, this is not conservative in any sense of the word, especially given his lifestyle. There is nothing good about this.
Right.
And this idea that you can't say that, like, because there are lines that are drawn in the sand. And unfortunately, like I said, on both sides, we have really crappy images, generally speaking, as like what a good father should be.
Right.
Or what a good man should be.
Yeah.
Or rather, I don't want to say good, but virtuous.
Right.
So, yeah. Do you want to know some statistics though? Because I don't want to just go down. Yeah.
Let's get depressed. Woohoo.
All right. Let's get depressed. All right. So, growing share. All right. So this covers this was done in 2021. Growing share of childless adults in the U.S. don't expect to have children. Okay, to ever have children. That is not actually what we're going to talk about. What we're going to go to is parents. Among parents and non-parents alike. So this is Pew Research, by the way. And women are equally likely to say they will probably not have kids or more kids in the future. Perhaps not surprisingly, adults in their 40s are far more likely than younger ones to say they are unlikely to have children or have more children in the future. Some 85% of non-parents. Okay, well, we're not talking about non-parents. I don't know why you brought that in the middle of a parent thing. While 91% of older parents say they probably won't have more kids, 60% of younger parents say the same.
Right.
A majority, 56% of don't care, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, like they go back and forth and it's really annoying. Here it is. When it comes to 18 to 49-year-old parents who say they are unlikely to have more children in the future, again, a majority, 63%, say it's because they just don't want to, which is wild to me. But
Yeah.
given the distribution of the ages, you know that distribution is higher. So it's more towards 49 than it is towards 18 because they had less kids. And
Right.
so that's part of it too. Fathers, 69% are more likely to say that than mothers, 59%, as are parents younger than 40, 71% when compared to with those who are 40 to 49, 57%.
Sure.
So that's crazy to me. As any parents younger than 40, 71% will say are unlikely to have more children. Like 71%. And that's under 40.
Right.
That is terrifying. And like,
Yeah.
um, so this is a random sample. So like when it comes to the distribution of the people that have kids, like the distribution is going to be around 2. Okay. Like, cause that's between 1 and 2. So it's not going to be like, well, Ryan, why aren't you thinking about those people who have like 4 kids? Because they're not the majority people.
Right.
Like that's why. Like that's so these are general trends. And so among those younger than 50 who say they were for some let's see, there was some other reason why they probably will not have more children, age, theirs or their parents, and medical reasons were among the top reasons why. Right, because they get married. Like the average age of marriage is I think 30 and 29 for men and women respectively. And
Jeez.
so that's way like what do you
Yeah,
like
that's
basically what are you
reasonable.
doing?
Right.
Like of course you're going to have medical problems and age problems for having kids because you're aging yourself out of this issue. Like you're literally living your to borrow an old phrase, YOLO,
Right.
you only live once, like through your 20s. And then in your 30, like when you become 30, all right, well, that's when you take life seriously and have kids. And it's like, okay, well, you may or may not actually see your grandkids. If your kids live the same way you do, you may or may not actually see your grandkids.
Right.
Uh, like, it's just crazy to me. Um, so that's 29%, meaning age, and 23% for medical reasons, followed by financial reasons and the fact that they already have kids. Smaller shares cite the state of the world, not having a partner or having a partner who doesn't want kids.
Mm.
This is what I thought was very interesting here. Mothers and fathers generally give similar reasons for saying it's unlikely they will have more kids, but mothers are more likely than fathers to mention medical reasons.
Right.
27% to 16%. All right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
While fathers are more likely than mothers to cite already having kids.
Mm.
And in that statistic, I'd be like, stop being lazy. Like, like I'm serious. Like, stop being lazy.
Right.
Because when you say, well, I already have kids, like you're talking like 1 or 2, right? That's not, you're not breaking the bank, guy. Like you're like if you are breaking the bank with those kids, it's because you're investing quite literally too much money into them and not
Right.
your own time into them.
Or a man that's too old to string sentences together got elected president. That might be.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. My wife is reminding me, hey, you weren't supposed to be on long tonight, LOL. And I was like, correct. So, so let's finish this last one. Well, all right, let's finish this last one, another one, and then we can get off. About a quarter of parents younger than 40 who don't expect to have more children in the future cite financial reasons, 26%. Right, but like we've talked about, a lot of that is their own doing.
Right.
Like they're choosing to like, oh, college is going to be so expensive. It's like, okay, well, we're actually at a point where college is not a necessity anymore. And I don't think people have caught on to that yet.
Right.
So compared with 8% of those 40 to 49, the younger group is also more likely to mention not having a partner because they have divorce or they have sex before marriage more often than not. gosh, so many problems would be solved if we didn't have sex before marriage.
Right.
Like, just so many problems. While older parents are more likely to say age is a reason why they don't expect to have more kids, 41% of those 40 to 49 versus 5% of those younger than 40. So the last thing I wanted to say or get to was another quick study. And what was it? Here it is. And I'm using, so it's from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but I laughed out loud when I read this because they said a really stupid phrase, and it's a woman who's
Oh, I
right.
hope it's not birthing person.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
Oh,
And so
I
more than
felt the pain in my gut when you. It's okay.
but just it objectifies a woman. It reduces her down. Like they say, well, you can't reduce this down to a vagina, right? Like the vagina monologues and all that other
Right.
crap. You can't reduce this down to a vagina. You are literally doing that when you call them a birthing person.
Yeah.
That is what you're doing. Like,
Men are jar opening people. That's all we're worth. We're high shelf reachers.
yeah, my wife asks me to like get the things on the top shelf.
Right. Are you a jar opener?
Are you a jar opener? Like just
Or a closet organizer? Like, I mean, it's so disturbing. Anyway, go ahead.
jar opener, man. All right. More than 2 decades ago, the average age of a first-time mother was 24.9. Now the average woman or birthing person
Oh goodness. You
is
love how
having their
it was
first.
mother back in the day.
I know.
Like, like she's like, yeah, before we use this silly jargon. It's like implicit. Like she's like, yeah, it was mother 2 decades ago.
I don't know why they don't. Why are they not saying fathers? Like, I don't know. Like, because it would be confusing and people would look at you with that cocked eyebrow look. Now the average woman or birthing person is having their first child at 27.5, a record high in the country. So I do want to emphasize this because there is this overlap that happens. The average age of a woman getting married is 29. The average age of a woman having their first kid or her first kid
Is 27.5.
is 27.5.
That's wild.
That's stupid. That's
Yeah.
just dumb.
Yeah.
Like both of those ages need to come down, especially given our replacement rate at 1.62. But like we are going to start, like you'll see. So I just want to, I'm going to get slightly political for a second. You will see more political conversation, maybe even from a conservative, like maybe even from President Trump and whatever, that we need to bring more immigrants in and do exactly what Europe did. The problem with that is that you then sacrifice your culture and you lose any semblance of identity because you're bringing in too many people. Because in order for us to replace the people that we've killed or contracepted, you're going to need millions of people. And so that's like tens of millions of people. And so that is going to shift our culture, and it probably won't get good because we're not talking about a group of people who are just used to being in a pluralistic society. Like the crazy, this is again, this will just finish up my political thought. Most people don't realize that most countries are homogenous, like significantly in demographics. And when you all of a sudden throw people into a non-homogeneous state, that's where you get culture clashes. And I mean it with people specifically, not just like pro-life, pro-choice issues, right? It's not just that. It goes to quite literally everyday issues.
Sure.
Because of the shift. And so that is something to be careful of. And like we cannot go into that situation. Like that would be very, very bad. we would end up like Europe, where they can't even, like, some countries can't even control their populations that they've brought over and given
Right.
welfare to. And women are afraid to go out at night because of the mobs of people who are quite literally just walking around, and can do things to her. And
Right.
it's atrocious. So so that's, you got a graph. So they I guess, yeah, they got a graph. And this really, well, 2009, what's crazy to me about this is 2009 is about the time that transgenderism, like, I'm not saying there's a causality, but
Right.
that's about the time that transgenderism actually took hold in the universities,
Right.
like, where they started to propagate, and just every other year it just, yeah. So
That's when the
um,
birthing people started. It's
what?
2009. That's when birthing people started. As a saying, was 2009. See, if she had written the article in 2008, it's moms. That's why the
Yeah,
distinction's
it's
there.
moms. It's
Yeah.
moms.
It was why I remember when that happened too. The sun eclipsed and there was like the sky turned red and then all the people changed. It was terrifying. It's a dumb joke. Anyway,
It is a
yeah,
dumb,
but
but it's a fun joke. Uh,
yeah, no, but to wrap up because I know you have to go.
yeah,
I know right now I have a friend, Braxton and Reba, who have their third kid. Speaking of families, who is in the NICU for um, their child who has an intestinal infection and was born about 7 weeks premature. So I do want to invite everybody, if you're okay with it, to just say a short prayer at
yeah.
the end of this, for that family and for all families kind of struggling with wanting to have big families and being open to it, and then having kind of these problems arise.
Wait, do you want us
Um,
to actually say a prayer live, or do you want
yeah,
to?
let's do it. I would love to do that.
Okay, I
Um,
mean, if you want to do that, because I am not prepared to just do an ad hoc prayer. So
no, that's okay. That's okay.
uh, but I would also, since we're doing this, and then we'll sign off.
Sure.
Uh, Pope Francis is not doing well right now, and
Yeah.
so regardless of how you feel about him theologically, or how he's acted as Pope, please pray for him. That for his health and for his spiritual well-being. Just because he's not in a great spot
Sure.
medically. So
Sure. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we want to pray for all families today, all families that are struggling with fertility issues, all families that are struggling with children with health or mental issues, all families that, particularly Braxton and Reba, who are struggling with a child in the NICU with intestinal infection. Lord, we ask that you provide healing both mentally, physically, and spiritually to these families. In Jesus' name we pray. We invoke your mother to intercede for us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
all right, thank you everybody for joining, and
Yeah.
thanks Jim for joining.
All right. Y'all have a good night, guys.